So welcome to the session where we're going to cover PhoneView version 6. So this is our launch event. I'll give you all the new and interesting information that we've added in this release of the software. The quick kind of running order is the usual kind of house rules and kind of background, just a refresher on UnifiedFX. And then what we're actually going to do is recap a little bit on PhoneView, just to talk about how it was originally designed, the principles we used, the way you can use it, just generally, different scenarios, for example. And then we just kind of touch on more historically some of the features we've added over the years. And then we'll move on to the kind of newer aspects, which fundamentally is how would you design a single phone remote control tool, and we'll kind of talk you through that. And then we'll show you what we've created, which is such a thing, and it's called PhoneView. It's actually going to do more than just that, but that's its kind of main starting point, because we're going to go into showing how to control phones with it, and also we've got some configuration management where you can edit and compare phone configurations too. Then we also have another piece, which is what we've tagged as NotificationFX, which is effectively simple text and audio messaging. So you'll tell you some more about that, obviously. And we're going to tell you how to install or enable, so to speak, the PhoneView NotificationFX functionality, and give you a demonstration of both the installation and use, configuration, etc. Of that, and then cover off any questions at the end. Usual kind of house rules. This session is being recorded. Please remember to use the Q&A panel if you do have any questions, and flag it for all panelists. It's myself and Mohammed on the session today, so Mohammed can help answer a few questions in the meantime. But I'll try to catch everything at the end if possible. As I say, quick reminder on UnifiedFX. So we're here to talk about PhoneView. One thing in terms of Cisco compatibility, version 6, which we're obviously launching today, we're going to be initiating the submission for IBT testing for Call Manager 12. So we're still compatible for obviously 11, etc. But we're going to kick off the process now. We'll release the software to tie it all up with the next main release of Call Manager. WallboardFX, which is obviously a useful kind of wallboard application that a few people might be familiar with. It's actually proven to be more popular than we actually expected, to be honest, which is not a bad thing, obviously. And I think the main reasons for this is it's very simple to install, administer, upgrade. Another thing is it's just all browser-based. We think everybody loves something when it's just browsers, and you don't have to worry about plugins and things like that. And one of the standout capabilities of the wallboard is just how fast it is, and you kind of have to see it in action to appreciate it. And then finally, we've got MigrationFX, which is being transitioned from the Technology Migration Program, the TMP program, to the MIP program, which is the Migration Incentive Program. So we're in all the programs that's applicable, which effectively means if you trade in either 100 Cisco phones or 100 non-Cisco phones as well, like Avaya phones, etc., and submit it as part of the MIP program with the appropriate MigrationFX part code, you can get a site license for a year for MigrationFX and just make all those phone replacements nice and easy. And the taps functionality is part of that, so that allows you to kind of provision the handsets, which is usually used when you're migrating from non-Cisco phones. Okay, so kind of back to basics. If you're going to design an endpoint management tool, these are the key points that we focused on when we put PhoneView together, where we wanted it to be interactive with literally tens of thousands of phones. So we went from where everybody else was at the time with single phone control capability, and we thought, no, it's much more useful to do proper endpoint management if we're going to interact with all of your phones, which means you have to handle really large systems. And if you're going to have those quantity of devices, you want it to be flexible for searching and filtering. And you need to make sure, especially when you're dealing with large systems, that you've got the relevant scale and performance. And a couple of key aspects of the endpoint data that you really want to work with is inventory and reporting for kind of gathering the data and generate reports from it from the handsets. And then finally, if you want to make changes all the way down to the individual endpoint level, that's where bulk operations comes in. And the way that we achieved that is using a number of analogies, primarily against Windows Explorer. So we took the concept of files on your PC and mapped that to handsets effectively. We also use the kind of folder navigation concept to kind of group devices together nice and simply. We also took care of the scaling performance by implementing a parallel queuing engine, which means it's very efficient and scalable. In terms of reporting, we'll gather that data and we've got a kind of built-in health report and a few other things that you can do with that information. And then finally, when it comes to performing bug operations, we've got automation macros that you can do almost anything remotely with one or all your phones. And that's the main principles for how we design PhoneView, and we'll always stick to that. But as you'll find out in a minute, PhoneView is something that we created, I put together a number of years ago, and then founded UnifiedFX off the back of it. But ultimately, it was a desktop form factor, which is great for a number of situations, but not for all situations. And that's what we're going to try and close the gap on as we move forward. In terms of the scenarios that you can use for PhoneView, you've obviously got, number one in the top there is bulk delete ITL, CTL files. That comes up continually. Good old Cisco for putting in that security by default feature. A very popular one is corporate branding, things like that. We also have the ability to do any level of kind of system application, load testing. We can also test SRST phones. We have ways to work with phones when they're unregistered as well. There's a whole bunch of scenarios in terms of training, inventory, things like that. And we even added in pushing out notifications to phones as well. Just it was a simple thing to add with the mechanics with that parallel queuing engine. And that's something we're now elaborating on with our UnifiedFX feature, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment. Obviously, firmware upgrades are there. Bulk update of settings, quite literally anything you want to do remotely on the phone, you can push that through en masse. And it helps with complex migrations and upgrades in a number of situations. So it's very heavy from a project capability perspective, but it still has obviously some operational use cases for day to day. But I would say it's going to be great on projects and usable for day to day operations. So we actually want to kind of expand our scenarios effectively into being better and stronger in the day to day operational pieces, which is really what you're going to see some examples of. Just a very quick recap, just a bunch of bullet points here in terms of the functionality that we've delivered over the years, and that's just going from, because we only really had a proper record going back to 4.0. Before then it was a bit more ad hoc when we were adding features and announcing them. So we just kind of pulled together a list of some of the key features that have been added over the last 3 years since we released 4.0, and obviously we're now all the way up to 6.0. Now, taking the same kind of principle of key points for designing a product and solving a problem, is when we designed the PhoneView application, it was to solve managing all your endpoints, right? But if you want to actually go back to basics and just concentrate on, if you were to put something together and all you wanted to do was work with one phone at a time, but do it really well, and especially with the modern technology, web-based and multi-platform, all those kind of considerations, then ultimately these are the points that we believe are fundamental to be able to deliver that. So first of all, you want it to resemble the phone model layout. So rather than being too abstract, PhoneView is definitely abstract. It kind of has to be because of the way it works with multiple phones. It's hard to make it look like a phone sensibly and have hundreds of them at one time. So the interface has to be abstract from a phone perspective. But if you want to focus on one phone at a time, you obviously want it to resemble that model layout. So therefore, that's when you would introduce the concept of model-specific skins. So therefore, for each model, it looks as close as we can sensibly put it. Now, I would argue that it's not really worth looking identical to a phone. There are a few tools and products that have done that in the past. That's one end of the spectrum. It's maybe a bit too far. You waste some screen real estate, etc. And then there's other tools and systems we've seen out there which barely resemble a phone. They're not even so much that they're abstract. They just look kind of bad. It's like just a grey page and a couple of shaded buttons kind of thing. So which is obviously, I'm sure, fine in terms of usability. You can click all the buttons, it does its job. But we're really aiming for minimal experience users to be able to drive this particular tool set. So you don't need to be a experienced administrator, you don't need to be familiar with everything. You just need to have a rough idea what a Cisco phone looks like, and this software should make perfect sense to you. So that's the balance that we'll aim for with this. Then the next thing, you want to be platform independent. If you're going to do that nowadays, it's going to be a web application. There's no two ways about it. It's essential. You want it to be easy to find devices, obviously. So, you know, as before, even with PhoneView, you've got tens of thousands of devices ultimately within, you know, one or more clusters that you might be set up to use against. But you want to make sure it's quick and easy to go and locate them. So therefore, you want to make sure you get simple filtering or searching capabilities by, you know, any field that's relevant or useful to you, you know, MAC address, VM, device field, things like that. And what's also, you know, something you want to make sure is that you've probably got specific devices that you go back to now and again, you know, particular test phones in a lab, particular phones on a couple of locations. Maybe you get 5 remote offices and there's 2 or 3 phones in each office that you typically work with, just for, you know, people aren't really going to use those phones too often, so they're good for testing without disrupting users. So you want to be able to just, you know, remember those devices and go back to them quickly. So therefore you want something like shortcut bookmark capability, so you can go straight into a device. And obviously, although it's the last point, it's, you know, as always, a very important one, you don't want to have any compromise in terms of performance and scale, which has really been the main original driving factor why PhoneView was put together as a desktop form factor, because to give that rich kind of user experience. Ultimately, the way the phones work and the way they host the kind of screenshots, etc., that they return is quite limiting. They generally can take 1 to 2 seconds, sometimes a little bit longer, depending on the phone model. So you need to make sure that once you have the image, you have a way to present it back to the user as quickly as you can to minimize that delay. And that can be a challenge with a browser-based application, you know, usually like polling techniques and things like that, which can effectively add more latency. But because of the experience that we've gained with our wallboard FX application and how we've managed to make that completely real-time and immediate, we've leveraged that same capability as well. And that's the kind of thing you want to do to get, you know, fast updates in terms of screenshots. And fundamentally, you want to have CTI for control, because, you know, if you keep hitting that phone's web server too much when you don't necessarily have to, it's just going to slow things down. So CTI for control and all-the-way screenshots is the best way to, you know, solve that problem. So ultimately, that is what we've created in terms of PhoneFX. We class it as the ultimate single phone control because we've tried to strike that balance of what it looks like, accessibility of using it, you know, familiarity, the mechanics under the hood, and achieving as close as we can manage desktop level performance, but in a browser. Which, if you can look at it top down on these bullet points, that means that obviously it is web-based. So, yeah, there are no plugins, as say we use our wallboard.fx experience to deliver that. It means that you can access it from quite literally anywhere. It is still at the back end, a Windows-based application, which we'll take you through and show you. But when you actually use it and interact with it, the whole thing is web-based, so nice and straightforward. And the way we've structured it, it effectively provides what you call deep linking, which means that from a URL, you can go straight to a particular page and state within the application and go directly to a phone, so therefore that allows you to bookmark those URLs to go to those specific devices. The way we've implemented it is it's powered by AutomationFX, which is the same platform that we use to build MigrationFX. And the good thing that gives us, well, it gives us 2 things really, is that code base is shared between PhoneView, which has a lot of the CTI integration, etc., and API integration generally with Communication Manager, so we can reuse that tried and tested capability. But also MigrationFX has a few unique elements to it that AutomationFX has delivered for it to be able to use, and that's automatic updates and synchronization of phone information that PhoneView wasn't never designed to be able to do. And it's probably the biggest negative, I would say, to using PhoneView on a day-to-day basis is that the kind of phone information that we have in there, you have to effectively manually stimulate. You don't have to update it too often, to be fair, but it is something that you have to kind of manually trigger, wait, you know, a few minutes based on the call manager for that data to kind of pull down because it's all throttled, etc., by the CUCM side. but we've completely automated that as part of the way AutomationFX works, and that's leveraged by MigrationFX. And MigrationFX has now been used by, I don't know exactly how many, I don't really keep track of it, but 100 plus customers, certainly maybe close to 200 now. Tens of thousands of phones, probably even 100,000 phones or more migrated and more on its way. It's worked with the biggest clusters that we know of. Cisco IT themselves have used it. I think there was like 54,000 phones in one cluster alone. So again, the scalability of AutomationFX has been proven out too. So we've got two well-proven products that we're pulling together and able to deliver the PhoneFX capability. What we've also done is integrate it. It works completely standalone, obviously, in terms of just browsing to a page, but we've also integrated it with PhoneView. So that means that within PhoneView, you go right-click on a phone, choose Control, and then it will pop out and open up the relevant page for you. You can go directly within the AutomationFX web interface and search and open control devices from there. And as I'm about to explain a bit more detail and show you, it is bundled with PhoneView version 6. That's the main new capability. Another piece of PhoneFX which we've added, this piece is actually very new. The kind of remote control side of it's been in and around for a while. We've just been polishing it off the last few months. But something that's relatively new that we come up with, which is proven to be very complementary to the whole concept of controlling a phone, is editing and comparing a device. So we kind of see a situation where, from a help desk perspective, yep, it's great. I can see what the user can see. I can, interact with their device remotely and, test things for them, etc. But a lot of the time, it's because you need to make an edit on that phone and test that edit. Probably half the time, you would have kind of CCM administration open and making some edits in there, and maybe viewing and testing with that device. So what we've effectively done is recreate the main elements of the device page within CCM admin and built it into the AutomationFX software and licensed it against the PhoneFX feature set, which is enabled when you've got PhoneView license on your system, which we'll tell you about in a little second. And that means I can actually go in, look at a particular phone, edit its configuration, but actually what we think is quite useful the way we've structured it is you can also compare it to another phone or another template, and you can do a field by field comparison and look at just the differences. So I'll try and show you a bit of a demo of that as well. So really, PhoneFX is not just about controlling phones. That's its kind of day one functionality, but we'll get a kind of set of things that we're going to add in, which we think will incredibly well complement the help desk use case. So the next thing that we've added in as part of this update and included it within the kind of PhoneView version 6 licensing is the text messaging capability, audio, text, alerts, etc. That PhoneView already has, but we've kind of beefed it up a little bit. Because from a PhoneView's perspective, it's quite handy, from the PhoneView interface, we can select a whole bunch of devices and push out notifications. But, you probably want to actually do it not just from PhoneView's user interface. It'd be handy if you just open up a web page and send a message, or have an actual XML service on the phone, as a lot of other kind of paging type solutions have. So that wasn't possible with a desktop-based application like PhoneView. It needed a web-based, service, etc., which AutomationFX delivers. So therefore, we were able to build in, recreate effectively that kind of text messaging functionality as a core component that sits on top of AutomationFX. So you can do, so effectively the screenshots there on the very right-hand side, that is a little snippet out of the web page. And you'll hopefully see that in the demo, and that shows you creating a message. There's different parts to the message. You can have a text component, which can have different subcomponents, title, message, prompt. You can make the text message disappear itself automatically, etc. Audio, you can tell it to use a file from the TFTP server, or you can upload your own audio file and play that out. It can repeat it as well. It can do live audio paging, so you can effectively set up tell it to link to effectively a multicast group and either dynamically or statically set a source phone that's going to transmit the audio, and whichever destination devices receive the message will be told to listen to that multicast address. And finally, there's a vibrate feature, which would only apply to the wireless handsets. You can enable it if you want to. Now, that's the web page one, that one on the right-hand side, but the kind of screenshot there of the phone with the kind of blue background, the middle graphic, that is effectively what this XML service looks like. So that is a nice simple service, just a straight URL, which I'll show you in a minute. And that URL, you basically set up as a phone service, or however you want to push it out to the handsets or make it available to them. By default, it prompts the user to choose a message and to choose a destination, and then confirm and initiate that message, send it, etc. That includes live audio broadcasting. But you can actually build the URL and include things like the name of the message, the name of the destination that's part of that, and skip those choices basically, so the user just could press one service button and effectively immediately initiate or start the notification. So it's a flexible XML service, the way we'll put it together. Now, so obviously you can send from multiple sources like the XML service and from the browser, but one key component, and we're going to touch on this, I think it's the 20th of December, we'll get a webinar on AutomationFX. But AutomationFX itself has a REST API, which we're going to start publishing and making available to people. The plan is to make that free. There might be some considerations around there, but the API itself will probably be free to use. And that means that I can actually use that API to send text messages. So if you wanted, you could have some cloud-based system, etc., using cloud integration tools like Built.io, Zapier, etc., and you can get them to take a trigger from something like a Sparkroom message, push that down to that REST API and push out some notifications to some Cisco phones. We've actually got a way of doing it in reverse as well, which I'll maybe touch on a wee bit at the end. Now, one good feature about the NotificationFX as well, which I think some other products aren't too good at, is that as far as we're aware, not looked into it in huge amounts of detail, a lot of products you have to kind of statically set devices, and there's maybe a kind of manual refresh mechanism. But when we built the AutomationFX platform, we come up with a way to dynamically filter, which has proven to be really useful. And we'll try and show you a bit of that. And that means you can create a filter, which is effectively a set of criteria, which might be a set of device pools, location regions, a whole bunch of different settings, models, switch addresses and things like that. And when you build that criteria into a filter, then even if those devices in your environment move and change, if they go, in or out of that filter, because of criteria that matches or doesn't match, are updated, then that phone will move in and move out of that destination set automatically. So it means you don't have to kind of keep manually provisioning all those destinations, as long as you've got a good choice of criteria. Perfect for just setting device pool level destinations, and you just know for sure, as long as obviously all your device pools are set correctly, that the right phones will receive that notification. So that's the NotificationFX side of things. Now, in terms of installing PhoneFX and NotificationFX, now some of the terminology, probably more in the user interface of PhoneView, primarily focused on the term PhoneFX. NotificationFX is like an add-on that we put in there as well, because we thought about calling it PhoneFX messaging or just bundling straight in, but we're keeping it separate from a kind of product licensing point of view. But some of the installer and information might primarily refer to PhoneFX, but under the hood, it's actually installing AutomationFX and unlocking PhoneFX and or NotificationFX functionality. Now, we've been talking about PhoneView version 6 for quite a while now. The larger part of 2017, certainly. First previewed it at Cisco Live, etc. Now, the reason why it's taken us to this point in time before we'll be able to release it is because we've had quite a lot of other product updates as well. Some have been actually relevant and useful to the architecture of PhoneFX, but also we've put a lot of focus on making the installation and setup as simple as we could manage, which I think we have done, because effectively all you have to do is install the new version of PhoneView, right, straight on top of the old version, and click one button, and it will deploy and configure AutomationFX, PhoneFX, etc. for you. So it was quite hard getting that down to one button, let's put it that way. But we think you'll appreciate it, and we'll hopefully get that to work in the demo and show you in action. But basically, there's a new little button in PhoneView called PhoneFX, and when you click it, depending on if you've already installed it in other kind of scenarios, but just in a clean system, for example, when you click it, it's going to open up this little dialog box. You've got a screenshot in the top right corner there, this PhoneFX setup, with just this one button install. You click that and it'll go away and set up the cluster for you inside AutomationFX. And the clever thing is, it uses the data from, or the details that we have of your cluster from PhoneView. So you've effectively already configured PhoneView, so we're just using that to set up and configure the relevant cluster information in AutomationFX, and that's then available to PhoneFX, NotificationFX. What we've also done is integrate it with PhoneView and PhoneFX, and that is a little screenshot of it. A little bit missing at the moment, which are still to add in, but it's just a small detail. When you right click on a phone, you get your usual menu choices. What I've added right now is a control option, but with just a small up-to-date to do, and we'll have the edit option in there too. And that means you can go right-click control, open up a single phone control instance to that phone in a browser driven by PhoneFX, right-click edit, and it'll take you to the edit page, and again, part of AutomationFX, and you'll be able to go away and make those changes, etc. So I don't know how much people will use that, to be honest. We'll see where things go, but we're just giving you that kind of flexibility. One key thing, and I'll try and show you in a diagram in a minute, that was quite useful that we managed to figure out, is a way to automatically detect AutomationFX. Because what you normally do is you only would normally have one instance of AutomationFX against a particular cluster. You wouldn't have 2 or 3 AutomationFX instances on the one cluster. You just usually have the one. But you might have 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 instances of PhoneView who maybe previously independently would work with the clusters and stuff. Maybe it's on a shared server, etc. But a number of people using it certainly. And those instances of PhoneView can automatically detect that single instance of AutomationFX. So when you do right-click control, it can auto-discover basically the web address to go to. So it's a relatively subtle and simple thing, but it just means you don't have to configure anything. Again, that's part of the objective of making this whole thing easy to install and configure. So this is architecturally how it's set out. So you've got PhoneView version 6 effectively has 2 products inside. It's got PhoneView as you hopefully know it today, with all the existing functionality described at the beginning. And what it also has is the optional ability to install AutomationFX. So when you install PhoneView version 6, it doesn't install AutomationFX automatically. The files are there and they're available to PhoneView to leverage, but it doesn't install it by default. The files, that say, are packaged, but the service isn't installed. But it's obviously just a one button click to install it, which I'll show you. But let's just say we have installed that kind of embedded AutomationFX instance, and we'd only do that normally on one computer. The other copies that are running PhoneView, they won't actually prompt you to install them because they'll detect an existing instance and just really take you to that instance instead of installing one. What it also does, because it's on the same machine, is AutomationFX uses PhoneView's license information. So normally, if you take AutomationFX from us, it's part of a MigrationFX license key, and that would unlock MigrationFX functionality on the AutomationFX software. You install it through the web interface and things like that. That's fine, that's still there, but to make things again simpler, we've kind of skipped the licensing component in AutomationFX. You don't have to do that because we'll be able to map it from the license data that you already have in PhoneView. So if you think about it, we're effectively taking the cluster data and the license data that you already have in PhoneView and fully configuring and enabling and licensing AutomationFX in one button is the key thing. In terms of that integration, we also have that right-click control aspect, and that would spawn an instance of the PhoneFX web page there. and just separately you can browse in or navigate and go away and create messages, send messages, etc. Too. But fundamentally, PhoneView version 6 is PhoneView plus AutomationFX bundled together, an optional deployment of AutomationFX, and the licensing that PhoneView has unlocks PhoneFX NotificationFX functionality of the AutomationFX platform. Now, some scenarios for how you would use them is if you imagine that that kind of outlined box there in the top left corner is your server, possibly, that's running PhoneView version 6. So you can, quite a lot of our customers have a shared instance of PhoneView running on a server usually. So ideally, all you do is upgrade to version 6, install that instance of AutomationFX, let it auto-configure, etc., and that's it up and running. But then you'll obviously have maybe local copies of PhoneView. And technically what we did is back in PhoneView 5.1 when we released it, and that's downloadable now, just so you know. So if you've got 5.1 or above already installed, so it obviously includes 6.0.2, because we actually included that automatic discovery mechanism, it will detect that PhoneFX instance. It means if you do right-click control in PhoneView 5.1 or above, and you already have that AutomationFX instance turned on another server somewhere, then it will auto-detect it and spawn that PhoneFX instance for you. That's just, so it means that even though we'll get discrete, client-based software, they can kind of work together with that AutomationFX system automatically with zero configuration. On the top right corner, we'll just get a little example of some physical IP phones. So this therefore means that we can remotely control those phones individually or en masse from PhoneView with its existing capability or from anywhere using a browser, either on the same PC as PhoneView, just spawning it from there, or iPad, phone, general browser, etc. So you've got the remote control aspect of your physical phones. But then if you look at the NotificationFX side of it, again, it's got different ways you could use it. You could use the kind of web interface side of it and leverage the NotificationFX functionality to push text messages en masse to those physical phones. Alternatively, you could push that XML service out to or make it available to one or two phones. They can navigate that XML service, initiate the message, and then that will, broadcast out that text, audio, paging announcement as required. Okay, so that's the slides out of the way. 34 minutes down, so that leaves me about 20 odd minutes for a demo. So fingers crossed we get it in time and the demo works. So bear with me a second, I'll just flip over. Okay, so I've got an instance of PhoneView version 6 running. If you think about it, I just imagine I had a previous version of PhoneView. I just done an in-place upgrade, just ran version 6 MSI on top. I've already been using it previously, added a couple of clusters and, set up for screenshots to work and things like that. So it's just a normal state of affairs that a lot of people will be in right now. So if I want to go and actually start using, leveraging PhoneFX, there's kind of two ways to do it. I could either just right click and use the new control feature, and it will automatically detect if there's an instance, and if there's not, it will then prompt you to install it. Alternatively, I can use this little PhoneFX button on the toolbar. Now, if it detects an AutomationFX instance on the cluster that you've got there in PhoneView, it will just normally take you to the web page of it, but because we've not got one set up yet, it's taken us to this PhoneFX setup form. So this is this magic button I was talking about. So if I just click that button, I get some prompts coming up. So I just say yes, that's just a privilege elevation prompt because we have to run it in admin mode. So we say yes to that. It runs some scripts for us. So that's now installing the AutomationFX service. The setup form there is just waiting for the service to start. It's just given the web interface component of that service a little bit of time to start up. Excuse me. Once that's started up, it will then auto-configure the AutomationFX instance with the cluster data that's already in PhoneView right now. So that says there, so it's configuring. So it's now started the service and it's running. And what it also does after it's installed is it auto launches your browser to take you to the web-based interface of AutomationFX. Now, what you have to do with AutomationFX is obviously log into it, and these are just call manager user accounts that you would use to log in. I'm not going to go into detail about permissions and stuff like that, but if you need to understand exactly what permissions are required, just reach out to us. We'll give you all the details. But for now, I'm just going to keep it simple and just use the admin account. But basically, the permissions to log in, if you're a system administrator, you have the ability to edit the devices on the phones page. That's the two criteria that we check for against that user account. If either one of those, then it will let you log in. And what you might be able to see is straight away, it's taken me to a list of phones, and that's the same phone data that was inside PhoneView. Okay, I'll just close that for a second. Just so you can see there's a little uninstall button if you want to just take that service away, etc. So you can put it in, take it away. Maybe you might try it out in a lab, put it on a little laptop or something, try it out first, see how you like it, and then you want to remove that instance, click uninstall, and then deploy it in a server. So that's why we can remove it from there too. So that's the same data in data view effectively that you're seeing inside that web page. And for anybody who's used their MigrationFX software, because it's the exact same platform, this should be very familiar to you. It's just the same thing effectively. But I'm not sure in terms of the audience how many people have used it yet. I don't know, maybe I would imagine 30–40% should probably have seen it by now, hopefully. But let's just say if you haven't, I'll give you a quick rundown. So it should be relatively familiar because it's just a straight table of data. The data itself has got the entire cluster in it. Now, our lab's only got 44 phones on it, but if this is a cluster with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, etc. phones, they're all in here, but it's an interface designed to scale to that level. As I say, we've got customers like Cisco that have used it to that scale. You can, from this interface, we can search. So if I want to search for a particular phone, for example, I've got a little note here to remind myself which phones I was going to do the demo with. So 10037. So there we go. As I type, instantly it filters. And what you might notice is that's the DN that's matched. But let's say what match something else. Let's say it's the model of a phone, 7961. There we go. There's a 7961. Let's say it's a person's name. Type in my name. And there we can see there's some phones that people are not allowed to edit with my name on them, but it's also matched the user field as well on that one. Let's say it's a device pool, so let's go for New York, for example, just type NEW. So it's a cross-field search. It's just like a lovely, simple Google search, which personally feels like night and day compared to CCM administration when it comes to trying to find a phone. Okay, so that's the searching capability, which hopefully you agree is nice and easy to use. What we also have is filtering. So on the left-hand side here, when we're on the phones page, we get a summary. Now this may look familiar because it's the same concept that's inside PhoneView. So if I expand status, for example, we can see we've got registered 28 devices, unknown 16. And if I click, now notice down the bottom here, it's got 44 entries for the phones table there. If I click registered, you can see it's now filtered to those 28 registered phones. So straight away, I'm working with active devices. Now, another important point, and I'll try not to go into too much detail because I'm conscious of time. Ultimately, all this information in here is completely automated. In fact, we've managed to get it to a point where it's so efficient that it puts absolute minimal load on UCM, but it manages to stay within a minute of changes in Call Manager. So if you have a phone that's unregistered and you plug it in, most of the time you'll find it within a minute, maybe two, or larger systems, maybe 3 or 4. When I say larger system, I'm talking 10,000, 20,000 phones and above. For most people on 5,000 phones or less, this will be incredibly fast, generally always within a minute. But it'll just take a couple of minutes for it to sync on larger systems because of the throttling we can't go beyond. So that means that this data is all correct. So even if a phone gets unplugged, moved to another port, picks up a different IP address, generally speaking, within a minute or two, that will be available in here, which means that when we go away and take screenshots, and which does need the phone's IP address, etc., you don't have to do anything. There's no group update, etc. It just is fully automated in terms of that information. If I go to the columns piece here, you can see there's a bunch of other data that you can bring in, firmware information, phone load, firmware download data, etc. We can export the information too in different ways, and there's some other features in here, but they're mostly related to things like MigrationFX, which I'm not going to show you right now. But let's just say I want to pick one of these phones and actually show you what PhoneFX looks like. So let's just go for this one. I think it's 10037. Now we might actually tweak this a little bit in the future, but for now you just click the little checkbox there and click the control button on the toolbar. It launches a web page. You might spot the URL in there, its structure. It's basically PhoneFX and the device name. So that's the bit that's the part that's bookmarkable. You can share that, send that, save it somewhere if you want to go back to this device at any point in the future. You can hopefully see the kind of second hands flashing away a bit there. Excuse me. So just pressing a few digits, we can see them getting reflected on the phone. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to find another phone, but I'm going to do it from PhoneView. So same thing in a different place. So I'll open up PhoneView, and the one I want in here is that second one, 10039. And if I right click on it and choose control, again it spawns a web page onto that phone. Let's bring up the other one, keep them side by side. So fantastic, I have two phones. So let's just make a call. Why not? So that's where are we? 10039. Dial. See the call coming in. We answer. A little bit of feedback next door there. Just put it on headset. And obviously from there, transfer, park, etc. Now, most of our phones will have the older 7941s, etc. But we do have skins for all the new models, etc. If I get time, I'll maybe show you a few examples of them. But most of our phones are the older ones that I'll have at the moment. So I'll just hang up that call, and that's it. So dead straightforward. That's either independently searched it through AutomationFX interface or bringing it open from PhoneView. Okay, so that's making a simple call. Now let's show you a little bit of the edit feature whilst we're here. So if I go back to this guy here, D7, let's uncheck that just so it's maybe a little bit clearer. What you might notice is the name portion there is clickable. So if I click it, it's taking me to the edit page. Okay, so not a very interesting configuration on this phone. It's only got one button, etc. We can see some key data, and we've kind of tried to copy key components from CCM admin's page. So you've got things like the model, its status, IP address, which is obviously clickable, captured in its firmware data there too. We can see all those fields. They're drop downs, etc. That all searches. You can just type. So, for example, I'm trying if I've got a useful one, but if I type in W, right, notice that it matches two things, even highlights it. So therefore, if I had 50, 100, or several hundred calling search spaces, I just start typing a couple of characters, and it will find them for me. And that applies for all these fields. Some of them are just straight toggle switches. Got them defined in there. So you can flick that around, click save, and make that update. The feature I quite like that we put into this interface, though, is the compare copy side of it. So if I flick the switch here, you'll see there's a second column aligned up with those fields, and I can search for either another phone or actually a phone template, part of the bulk admin tools phone template feature, because it was mechanically easy for us to work with either type of device. Its configuration data looks the same, but we thought that some people procedurally might use phone templates, the regular bat-in devices, so got some common templates they use. So it's almost like their reference configuration. Other people might use, here's a good phone on a site, that's the one that you always make a copy of, kind of thing, when you're provisioning a handset. So we're trying to fit with those probably typical behaviors that people follow today. So if I click in here, Again, this is nice and simple searchable, so I can type in, you know, the MAC address, the DN, description, that kind of stuff. So I think I was going to do the DN, so it's 10039, so let's look for that guy. So we see it's matched it, click it to choose it. And it may be a bit subtle there, but you just should notice that the grey fields on the right there, they've now been populated with the data from the compare phone. And so you can see things side by side, field by field. But this nice little button here called difference, if I click that, we can now see just two fields are different. Now, I guess the description is almost always going to be different. And if I tick that box there, that's effectively your copy. So it's going to copy that individual field over when I click save. So it gives you, you know, as I say, nice simple direct editing, compare it against maybe reference configurations, other phones in that same location. And if you do want to, you know, pull certain parameters over from the compare phone, you can do that on a field by field basis as well. So we think that's hopefully going to fit with the way that most people typically kind of update and test and change phones. Now let's go back. So what's my next step? Oh yeah, so this bit should be a bit of fun actually. Let me just check this is working before I commit myself to bringing this up. It's looking positive. Excellent. Right, now might not be completely obvious to you at first, but I'm just going to change over to here, right? Now what you're seeing is the iPad that I've got on my screen here. Now, unfortunately, make this kind of recording thing hovering over it, which is a little bit of a nuisance. I know they go nice to get it away. So I've got an iPad next to me, which is wired up to the computer here, so you can see its screen. So I can just, you know, go up and down, search. Now, from the iPad, I'm going to find a phone and control it. So which one? I think we'll just use those same phones again. So that's 10037. So you can see as I type in my iPad, I've got a keyboard attached to this one, obviously be on screen normally if you don't have it. I click the tick box, I click control. It spawns it open. It's a bit zoomed in to start with, but if I just kind of flick it up like that, it will go back to normal. And we can see it's got the phone there. Let's go back to here and find another device. Let's do the other one, 39. Oops, touch properly. Click control. Spawns open another page. Onto that other phone. Let me just give a wee flick to get it to resize there. Okay, now one of the nice things about the iOS 11 update on the iPad is you can do a split view. In fact, there's different types of split views. I'm going to do it within Safari, so watch this. I drag this, shuffle it to the right-hand side, and I now have a two-up display of phones on my iPad. Now, proof's in the pudding, let's make a call. Nothing too exciting, but I'll just call from the phone on the left to the phone on the right. So my touch skills are good enough for me. Hit dial. There we are, so we can see the call appearing on the right-hand side there. Just press that first soft key to answer it. And again, we've got a nice call, and we can do all the fun stuff we want to do from there. Hang that up. And, you know, you can do things like press settings and directories and messages and, you know, navigate from there, press the keypad to choose the menu items, all that good stuff is all there for you. But let me just show you a slightly different use case, right? Let me just, oh man, that's where I forget how to do this. All right, let's do that, do that. That's still there. Let's get rid of that one as well. We're back to here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to open up my email. Right now, look here. I've got a email I sent to myself as an example, and notice that URL there. So that's the URL of this AutomationFX instance, and the appropriate kind of deep link, so to speak, that takes us to that a phone. So maybe a user had a problem, they reported it. You may have some automation or workflow that, you know, grabs the phone's MAC address and builds this URL for you and submits a ticket, or you simply copy and paste it from one engineer to another and send it via email. Now, if I just touch that, because of the two-up display kind of feature of the iPad, I can just open that at the same time as an email. I could drag that down, shuffle that over, and I could be reading the problem description on the left-hand side within the email. And on the right hand side, obviously just actually go and test and stuff like that. I could then go and flip into the edit side of it. So that hopefully gives you a little idea of what you can do with the PhoneFX from desktop, PhoneView integration, and the fact you can just use it now from, you know, make your life easier from anywhere. Right, let's go back. So the next section, how long have I got? Oh, running tight on time now. I'll do this best I can, but I want to show you the UnifiedFX functionality, so I'll be quite brief about it. If I go to the phones page here, let's take that search criteria away for now. And I'm going to create a filter. Now, I haven't really touched on that yet, but the thing about PhoneView, which is great, is these summaries and the fact you can just tick on them and filter to subsets of devices. But what you cannot do in PhoneView is save those, you know, filters. But that's something that was easier and therefore implemented inside here. So if I go just a simple one, I'll just choose those chunky models we have, the 7941s. So that's me, you get two criteria tick. That's registered 7941s. So I've got 13 of them. If I click in here and I just give it a name, so I'll call it Reg 7941, press enter, click the little save icon. So there we are. So we've got that filter. We can go back to that. We can create many of them, and you know, click and choose and recover that filter at any point in time. We'll go back to that kind of working set. Notice that if I search, whilst I've got anything filtered, it's the subset of the search that you're subset of the filter rather that you're searching within. Now let me show you the UnifiedFX side, so that from the browser aspect of it, I can define messages on this messages page. So we don't have any at the moment. It's a new system. I click new. That opens up this form for us. So we'll just say a simple and traditional hello world. We'll set it to 10 seconds. It could stay there if you wanted to, but just for simplicity, I'm going to get the message to get rid of itself. Now I can turn on audio, live paging, vibrate, and stuff like that. I'm not going to worry about that right now. We hit save, and we have it available to us. Now, I've got different ways I could push that out. The first thing I'm going to do, actually, I'll do it via the XML service first, and then I'll show you it from the web page. So if I jump back to PhoneView, and I'm going to turn on my automatic screenshots in here. Let me just turn that one off. And what you might notice is I've got a URL in my command bar here in PhoneView, and that points to the XML service on that instance of AutomationFX that I've deployed. Now you can subscribe that as a XML service and call manager, you know, make it appear as a button on a phone, all that kind of good stuff. But just in case you didn't know, you can actually push URLs to phones from PhoneView as well. So I'm just going to show you that. So I've got a URL copied in there already. I hit send. Excuse me. So it's now displaying the XML service that's running on that AutomationFX server. You might notice there's message 1, which is just to try and prove that there. That's this message here. If I select it, so I can just choose the number against it or the soft key, so I just press number 1 to choose it. So that would be my message choice at that stage. Select filter, so that's that Reg 7941. That's this guy in here, so I could define multiple of these, etc., match it by device pool, all that good stuff. So I'll choose it, so just press number 1 again. And now it's just got the confirmation page, so it's just saying, confirm you what it's saying, gives you the name of the message, gives you the name of the filter, and it tells you how many devices it's basically going to send to. So yes, we want to do that, so we'll do soft key 2. And if I've set up my PhoneView instance correctly, yep, looks like I have, then these other phones that I've got open in PhoneView are those registered 7941, so they're the ones receiving the text message. So you can see the message sent successfully. It appeared for 10 seconds and disappeared. Now let me do the same thing again, but I'm going to do it from the web page. So let me go back to here, and I can have as many messages as I want in here. Obviously, I can actually from here make edits too. I can go away and actually, in fact, let's just do that. Hello world 2, press enter, and fingers crossed that should have saved it. But I can turn on the audio, turn on and off the audio, text components, and live paging to interactively from here. But let me send it. So I could just go into edit, obviously, and make a change here and send, save send from here if I wanted to. I can obviously move them, but you can send it quickly from here too. So I click this guy, and this drop-down list is the same list of filters that's on the left-hand panel there. So I choose Reg 7941. It's saying sending it to that destination. If I flip over to PhoneView, we can see that whole World 2 updated message is now being pushed out and received by all those phones. So I think that was it from the demo portion. So yeah, let me just jump back to my slides. So a couple of slides just to finish up. I'm hopefully get a few questions if I'll just double check on before we do get right to the end, but we're kind of nearly on the hour. So I'll probably keep going as much as there's questions, etc. But let me just show you a few things before we get to the kind of normal time limit. So main points are it's free to upgrade for everybody who has a valid license key. You just install the new version directly on top. Just uses the existing license. Our licenses are right to use, they're not version based, so as long as the expiry date on the license is valid, you can basically put any version of newer software on top. What we'd say is if you're going to enable the AutomationFX PhoneFX component, it's best if you're on a 64-bit operating system. Now, PhoneView itself is 32-bit, and technically AutomationFX can run as a 32-bit application, but there's probably some, it's probably not, it's not ideal to be honest, because it's just more efficient and more scalable. So it's better if it's on 64-bit. So we basically put that down as a requirement. PhoneView as well as AutomationFX now have a newer .NET Framework version they require, which is 4.5.2. The MSI will prompt you if it is required, but most new versions of Windows have all that built automatically anyway. It's part of the Windows updates. As I said, you can just install it on top, and we've published it today, so you can download it. So the exact same version I just gave you a demo of, you can get with that PhoneView beta link. Now remember, any of this data, you can, information you can get for us in the recording, etc., just emailing sales@unifiedfx.com. In terms of just a quick summary of the roadmap where we're kind of going to go with some of this new stuff is, as I've shown you, we've got device level editing. The next thing we're working on is line level editing. So, don't know, that could be 2-3 months, whatever, but we'll get, there's probably some simple stuff we can do in the shorter term, and more advanced stuff we'll do longer term, but we'll see when that kind of functionality drops in there. The next thing that we're also looking towards, and we'll try and tie it together with the line edit timeline, is user policies, which, for anybody familiar with the Enterprise Edition of PhoneView, as I say, PhoneView is a very powerful product, and what we have is a policy feature which allows you to, when you turn it on, effectively means people have to log in to use PhoneView, and based on the login and the policies assigned to it, the certain features in PhoneView will be enabled, disabled, etc. The same concept we're going to add into AutomationFX, because you might want people who can only send messages but can't edit phones and all that kind of stuff, or maybe not even control phones. So that kind of granular control will be through that policy feature. But we've also designed it in a way that allows it to also be multi-tenant, so you could have one user can see certain devices, another user can see different ones, etc. I will structure that feature. Another thing which was actually brought up a couple of times is you cannot do remote audio in the browser in PhoneFX at the moment. You still would need to use PhoneView if you want to listen to the phone remotely. But we're looking at a way to add that in so you can kind of get that audio experience as well via the browser. But that's a bit tricky, so that's why it's near the bottom of the list. So it's that kind of hopeful desire. In terms of NotificationFX, we've actually already implemented the text-to-speech feature. We've just not published it yet. That just means it takes the text that you type in as a message and compiles it to a file, audio file, and plays that audio at the same time as the text gets pushed to the screen. So that's quite a nice experience actually, just to read and hear the audio of the message at the same time. And then I was touching on this a little bit earlier, so we've got that REST API method to initiate messages to phones. We actually have the same thing in reverse, which we've actually added technically, we're just not really publishing it yet, which is the ability that when you send a message from the XML service or from the web interface, etc., of the NotificationFX feature, normally its destination is just Cisco phones, but we've actually added the ability to make the destination a webhook. So that means you can fire a URL out in the cloud somewhere, Zapier and all that kind of stuff, and push out notifications to any other system, basically. Now, we were having some good fun doing this the other day, and we had messages that were being sent to Cisco phones and Spark rooms, just because Spark's the cool topic of the day. Well, has been for a little while now, and probably will be for a little longer too. But it didn't have to be Spark rooms; it could be anything. But that was a good bit of fun. Okay, where are we in terms of slides? Is that the last one? Yeah, so go back to Q&A in a wee second, but just a quick reminder, there's a couple more events to go this year. We've got PhoneFX, NotificationFX. We're going to launch them. It's the same functionality of Scene effectively. We're going to launch them as a dedicated product. There'll be a free level and a paid level for that, which we'll define and expose. And that's due 2 weeks from now. And then we've got Automation FX itself, the kind of API side of it. We're going to give a preview of what that's all about. We've actually had this API component in Automation FX for a little while. We've got some people using it, and primarily under NDA, etc. But we're now starting to drip feed it out and working towards making it generally available at some point in the first quarter next year. So you'll be able to see a preview of what that's all about and why we're putting it together. And then we're actually going to start recycling some of the products. So we actually launched Migration FX version 3 last month, but just to make sure we kind of catch everybody, or if anybody missed it, we're just going to start rerunning some of those sessions. So we're going to revisit Migration FX 3.0 again, and just give everybody a reminder of what's in that version of the software. Okay, so that is it for slides. So we've kind of hit the hour, so feel free to drop off if you get time pressure. Appreciate everybody spending the time with us. I'm just going to stop the recording for now.